And welcome, everyone. It's good to be with you all today. I'm glad that you were able to join us from wherever you are. I see people from all over the United States and even the Galilee. Right, Valentine, good to see you. Representing the people. Am Israel is here all the way from the Holy Land. So it's good to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to a good discussion, not only on the overview that we did today on the book of Numbers. Again, I want to stress that for me, and Betty said something very similar, it's something about the wilderness. I remember my first trip to Israel. I was so excited. I remember in my mind, I was thinking, what's going to be my favorite part? And so I thought, it's got to be Jerusalem. I mean, if I forget thee, I went through all the stories in my mind. I could see the battles. All the verses, all the Psalms. I kept thinking hundreds of times Jerusalem is mentioned, and I couldn't wait to see it. And of course, it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't what I thought. And I don't know how else to say it. So I'll leave it right there for a minute. So I said, oh, you know what? I'm there already in Israel. And I said, it's going to be the Galilee. When I get to the Galilee, because I grew up in a Christian home, all the stories, Jesus on the sea, I know it's going to be the Galilee. It's got to be the Galilee. I can't wait to get to the Galilee. And I went to the Galilee, and, it was fantastic. It was out of this world. But there was something, it wasn't what I thought. I was expecting something else. I don't know how to explain it, so I'm going to leave it there. But let me tell you this. When that bus started winding down that road, and I saw the Dead Sea, the Sea of Salt, as the Bible describes it, pop into my view, and I felt the heat. I mean, good Louisiana boys like heat, but I'm telling you, as we made our way through the Judean wilderness, I'm telling you, there was nothing quite like it. And it's why that when I go to Israel now, even after the tours, or if I go and I have time before, I'm getting in a car, I'm getting in a cab, I'm doing whatever I can to make my way to that desert, because that's where, I'm telling you, it's where it all begins. We're going to see, as we work through the biblical text, we're going to see that redemption begins Bamidbar, in the Arava. And so I can't wait to get into some of that with all of you today. And now we've got Clody raising her hand. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. How are you, my sister?
Oh, I feel great.
Good.
Finally, we're together. I
Yes,
missed you all.
I missed you. I missed you. I missed everybody. It's felt like
Yeah.
a lot longer than it really was. It's only a few days, my goodness, but I love you guys.
It was some kind of a desert.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you for the class. It was perfect. Uh, I just wanted to say how much I was relating myself to all of it, because I believe that me coming out of Europe, coming out of Albania and getting here to the United States is some kind of a lech lecha for me.
Yeah.
And also some kind of a desert, because I'm nowhere where I knew myself at.
Yeah.
I cannot recognize myself. I cannot recognize people. I cannot recognize faces. And I mean it in a good way.
Right.
Like, you don't have anymore the same points of references. All the points of references change. So even with you guys, it's not the same as I had you back in Albania.
Yeah.
As to how I refer myself to you here, it's different.
Yeah.
And I believe that whenever we feel that drowsiness, and whenever we feel like we're all by ourselves, alone,
Yeah.
I think it's the perfect moment to call on God.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Bible doesn't talk to us as much, we can start digging other kinds of literatures or informations or sources, or we can meditate, or we can pray. Just stay there and pray and try to connect to God and to nature and to ourselves. So I believe that in a sense, all of us have the possibility to leave the desert, to experience the desert.
Yeah.
But it's that there we have a choice to use it to use it in order to stumble back to our old beliefs and routine and perhaps even bad vices, or will we use it to get out of this desert moment so that we can get closer to God, closer to home, I would say, and closer to our soul and closer to the source. And I believe that that's what all this metaphor of the 40 years of living in the desert is all about. And to me, it's a revelation.
Revelation.
It's a revelation when you said that they weren't moving all the time.
Yeah.
They were in 1 or 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
They sat there. It's not like they were running or walking all the time.
Right.
And that was a revelation to me because it really sits in you. They were really experiencing desert and they chose right.
Yeah.
Not all the time, apparently. Not all
Right.
the time.
Right.
Because they didn't want manna and they were like, no, I'm going to go back to the Orthodox meat eating diet.
Yeah.
I want that one. I miss those onions.
Oh yeah.
So it's not all the time that they were really loving, enjoying, and trying to enhance their system of belief, of living. But yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. And at times when I first came here, I didn't understand this as a spiritual opportunity. I
Yeah.
did not understand it like that because my mind was, if I want to make a lech lecha or a spiritual journey, I have to go to Israel. I have to make
Sure.
aliyah, or so it's the most blowing of the mind when I see that this experience towards the West may be even more spiritual than we think. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
I love that analogy, and I can relate hearing you say that, even though I've been, here my whole life in America. But I find it very moving when I read historical accounts. For instance, when the founding fathers, as we call them, came here from various places, but, a lot of that was fleeing what they felt was religious persecution. When they made that journey, for them, they had an easier time of relating it to the biblical metaphor, as you called it, because they said, this king is like Pharaoh, and we are like, and they actually use that language in a lot of their documents, that there was
Yeah.
a 1-for-1 equation between the two. But I also know that we often, and you described this journey you made physically. I mean, you leave the land of your birth, your father's house. You physically did that, and I can imagine the connections that go off as you make that move. in some ways, even if that was a wonderful experience, but for me, I look around and sometimes I think in some ways spiritually, many of us can relate to that spiritual side of the move. I left, my father, Jeremiah 16:19, our fathers have inherited lies and vanity and things wherein there is no profit. And so many of us have left some of those bad ideas, religious ideas, in search of a pure religion, so there is some connection there, but one thing I want to make sure that people at least hear from me, my view, is that I often hear and used to think that the desert, the wilderness, represented a time of barren, no spirituality. It's dry and it's harsh, and it might be all of those things in some ways, but we're going to see that God was closer to his people in that desert than any other time in history. We could say the greatest generation in some ways. And what's so amazing is that the prophets say it's going to happen again. It's going to be the same kind of deal. So good stuff. What else, Clody?
If I have anything else, I might pop up again.
Okay, well, pop up again if you feel like it. We're looking forward to it. Hey, good to see you. Glad I'm back. I'm glad to be with everybody today.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Let's see. Is it Belinda or is it Glenn or is it both? How you guys doing?
Hey there.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you and your family members doing?
We're doing good. Yeah,
good.
All surviving. We're all surviving.
Good.
Yeah. So what was wanting, what came to mind for some reason, I'm thinking of when we were in Israel and in Biblical Tomorrow, especially.
Yeah.
With you guys, with you and James and Jono, and then your whole busload.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a really wonderful, wonderful time. And what I'm remembering is when James Tabor said that the roads never change.
Yeah.
The paths never change. A path turns into a bigger path, which turns into a road. And so all of those paths and roadways that have come about and have never changed in many, many, I don't know, centuries.
Oh yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it just made me think with this wilderness concept of how I guess, because you said a few things about, the one God, that it was the one God of the children of Israel that was helping them learn to walk in the wilderness. And he does that for all of us. And all of the paths that led into the wilderness, all other paths, those same paths lead back out of the wilderness. And so I guess just bottom line is we're in and out of the wilderness at will, kind of at will. God wants us in there with him and following his ways endlessly, constantly. But yeah, everything began there. Everything kind of ends there. It's just, it's a very important, I love this message that you're doing. And I love you did a great opening of explaining the plan of this series, and gave us a lot of little things to think about. And I'm assuming, all those 3 parts that you mentioned of numbers, you're going to kind of hit
absolutely
each of those. And I love the way you teach, Ross, and I just feel like you really you trigger the heart and the mind and the soul to go back to our roots and to be honest to Moses and honest to the scriptures. And it's, I remember early on in my walk away from Christianity and more towards the, as we called it at the time, the Hebrew roots of the faith,
Right.
Anyhow, I just remember non-denominationalism coming in there, just attending non-denominational churches, which were just basically Christian churches with a twist kind
Yeah.
of thing. And, then the kind of the Messianic, we never went to a Messianic group, never got involved in a Messianic group, but we were involved. We were researching all of that area, and then the Noahide area.
I know.
And
Yep.
yeah, I even, there was at one point I was contemplating converting to Judaism.
Sure.
And, I kind of, thought that was the way to go. And I just feel like the path that God has put us on now with you, with United Israel World Union, you know, I don't know if this began with James Tabor with Glenn or where it all began, but at any rate, this path has led to where we are right now with this group of people that are right here on your Yachad, that are seriously wanting to just get to the bottom of things for a better relationship with God for ourselves, and to just understand the whole picture so that when we are, when you are in conversations with other people, that you have some education behind you, that you have some knowledge behind you to share and to even debate with and whatever. But I have a daughter that we're not Catholic, and we didn't raise our children Catholic, but I have a daughter, our Bailey, Bailey.
Oh, yeah.
She's getting married this fall, and she's marrying into a Catholic family, and they were worried to tell us that she's going to get married in a Catholic church and all of that. And I said, we just told her, you two have to find your own path to God. And if you, and all paths somehow lead to God, whether it's, I don't know how, but just like in the wilderness, they didn't stick with doing exactly what God said. They quickly, when Moses went up to the mountain, he comes back down, and quickly, what are they doing?
Yeah.
They're building a golden image, which is what they were told not to do.
Yeah.
And how quickly they just immediately reverted back to what they were doing in Egypt. And clearly, our merciful God, as you pointed out, clearly he, for the most part, he lets us do this. He let back now what Moses did. He made him drink the gold.
Drink that idol water. Yeah.
Yeah, drink the idol water. And what? Think about it though. What happens to us when we drink that idol water?
Yeah.
When we drink that, when we get back to worshiping idols, every time we're, get sucked into worshiping music idols or Hollywood idols or whatever idols, as I'm very careful not to let Ross Nichols become an idol.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If you ever feel like it's happening, call Bridget. She'll make you feel better about all the bad stuff. She'll let you know. Yeah.
I bet she will.
She will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but this whole thing really made me think. I love James Tabor like crazy. He's just such an amazing man, and I just praise God I got to do that tour with him.
Yeah.
And be under his tutorship of Israel. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful experience. Anybody want to have a great experience in Israel, go with James Tabor.
Absolutely.
But that really stuck in my head about the roads. And then when you're saying this, and it it's just amazing. All of the connections are just amazing. And that's all I got to say.
Hey, it's a beautiful image, though. What you bring up is very important. It's the roads, if we think about it, and you talked about Bailey and her life and how she's got to choose her own path. It really is. And I've been in different places in my spiritual walk before, where I thought, well, my kids, and I need to make sure that they're doing this and they're, because at times I felt like, hey, Daddy knows best. You have to follow what I think. But I tell you, I look back on my own personal journey, and unlike some people who get bitter over their Christian upbringing, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. It trained me. My love of the Bible and the stories really has never done anything but grown. And when you mention roads, I look behind me and I grabbed this book. I don't know. I'll probably have to put the title where people can find. I don't even know if you can find this book now. It's expensive. It was expensive when I got it. It's called Sinai Journeys: The Route of the Exodus. And it's by Professor Har-El, Har-El, and Professor Manesha Har-El. Anyway, he was a professor of history and biblical geography at Tel Aviv University. And this is, in my opinion, a book that changed my life in terms of understanding the narratives that we're about to get into, because I think one of the things that people do is they read the stories, and in their mind, like I described a few moments ago, when I went to Israel, I had drawn Jerusalem in my mind a certain way. This is going to sound crazy, but when I went to Israel, I wanted people in uniform. I wanted them dressed like the biblical characters. I didn't want to see like Valentine with a cell phone. I mean, I've learned to love Israelis like that. Yeah, with a kippah. I wanted to see somebody with a gown, like dress like an ancient Israeli. But the thing about it is the more that I studied, the more I wanted to put things in their proper context. And so geographically, I think it hit me when I was spending a lot of time in the desert. And I mean, from not just the Negev, like you can look at a map, and when I say Negev, like if you start on, like right above Gaza, just to give you an orientation, I'm not saying that that's it, but talking about Beersheba and everything south, all the way to the Dead Sea, to the African Rift, and you look south, you look at that land, and it's not conducive to an easy route. Like sometimes I think I look at biblical maps and they draw a line, a straight line from nearly maybe drive from west to east and then maybe nearly south. People a lot of times will follow the Gulf of Suez, and they go to the traditional Mount Sinai, and then they come back up, and then there's a bunch of squiggly lines, and all of that stuff is guesses. But here's the other thing that I realized, looking at a lot of that land, you can't get there from here. You just mentioned, Belinda, the roadways. And what Har-El's book does is it describes these ancient paths. Think of Jeremiah 6:16. Stand ye in the ways. Stand on the ancient paths and look for the good way where your soul can find rest. I can imagine all these ancient paths running through that desert. And you know what? That's how it had to be. So now we can retrace a lot of the journey if we follow these ancient paths. I remember when you mentioned that we had discussions at Biblical Tomorrow with James Tabor and you and everybody that was there about these ancient roadways. We tell people this all the time. Highway 90, which runs right there by Biblical Tomorrow, that's, yes, it's a new modern highway, but parts of that were ancient trails. If you cross over into Jordan, the King's Highway is now under or very close to it are the modern roadways, because you just can't get there from here, as we say. There's a lot of places because of the terrain, you have to go a certain way. Here's the bottom line. If you think that way and you take it into a metaphor, I think a lot of times I can look back and I can see I could not have been on a different road than I was on at that time. So it's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful, and by the way, I'm glad that you guys are with us too. So just like you're happy to be here, I'm happy you're here. Did you have anything else, Belinda?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, tell the whole family I said hello, and Mazel Tov. Whenever the marriage happens, keep me in the loop.
Okay.
All right. God bless.
All right.
Michael Douglas, Shabbat Shalom, my friend.
Shabbat shalom. So
Hey,
so
how
good
are
to
you?
see you. I'm still here,
Good.
but I don't really want to talk about that so much right now,
Okay.
but it's still a complete. Well, it's kind of like being in the wilderness,
I
I suppose,
understand.
of uncertainty, which is very interesting, to be in a place where you just absolutely don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
or and being okay with that, is an amazing experience. I was in my early 20s, first time that I came to Hawaii. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm in Hawaii right now, but I ended up in the desert in California, in Palm Springs, Indio, and I was drawn there in a way, I just and it was very interesting, because you could, off the main highway there were canyons that had been used by the Native American, belonged to the Native American tribes that lived in that area, and you could walk into those canyons right off the main highway, 1 mile out of the city of Palm Springs. And then there was water. You would hear the sound of water, and then there'd be pools and palm trees and waterfalls. It was just beautiful.
Yeah.
But but what I wanted to say is what you've been talking about. That path in the wilderness. The way I learned this. I was reading a translation of the New Testament many years ago. I might even still have that copy somewhere. But there's a text in the third chapter of John, the Gospel of John, and it uses the term. Most translations read that. Let me look at that just so I
Okay.
can don't slaughter the text. Oh yeah, it's in the third chapter, and I think it's verse 20. 21 maybe. It
Okay.
starts and it says, but whoever does what is true comes to the light. And that word true, you could look it up in Greek, but this translation, when I read it, it's like, wow, that just makes sense, and it says there, not whoever does what is true. It says whoever practices the way of righteousness comes to the light.
I like that. That sounds like the Dead Sea Scrolls a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, to me, there's a very good chance, that some of those Dead Sea Scrolls might have been written by John. I think that's a possibility, but that way of righteousness, it's not really a path like a road,
Yeah.
on a map, but it's an internal place that we can learn to walk in and live in, and if we do that, we come into tune, into harmony, into unity with something that's very expansive and beautiful, where there's an experience of life. And so, when you started out with a great class, I don't know, it wasn't really torture to skip the last chapter of of
Oh, of
Leviticus.
Leviticus. I actually have
Yeah.
the notes for that, and I'll put it together into a class at some point, God willing. But it just didn't happen. So
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't really big torture, maybe it
Yeah.
was like it was a relief to you in a way, and it wasn't a relief to me, and I know people missed it, and I
Yeah.
did too, um but this you started out in the class today with that Star Trek thing, to go where no man has ever gone.
Yeah.
And right when I heard that, I thought I remembered something that I've learned in the last few years and again, being no expert and not just a novice in Hebrew, and I know there are Hebrew speaking people here, and many, but I learned something that was just like all of my all of my study in the Bible, and when in the West, I think in our in English language, when you hear of wilderness, the idea of wilderness, that's what I always thought of, or I always pictured like some great vast thing that was unexplored
Yeah.
and that there was no paths, and so which is totally valid, but it didn't make sense in understanding the scripture that much, and that picture that it didn't really work. And then I can't remember the guy's name, but it was some Hebrew book on study, and I know it just slipped my mind at the moment, but he brought up the point, that the root word in wilderness, bar,
Yeah.
uh, that root was the same root that appears in the word devarim, or
Devar. Yeah. Yeah. I've
the
seen that.
words,
Mm-hmm.
the wilderness, and then the name Deborah all have that same, which is a bee, right?
Right.
Deborah
Yep.
is
Yep.
a bee. And so, he brought up a really interesting, but what do these things have in common? And I never would have guessed it, but when it was like a little light bulb went off in my head, it's order. It's
Okay.
natural order. And the beehive being so organized and the importance of order. I think in the Strong's, the concordance says something about oh arrangement, like
Maybe
pointing to an
so. Mm-hmm.
arrangement. Yeah, because if you just put words in a hat and shake it around and then pour it out on a table, you'd be lucky if you get anything that makes sense.
Yeah.
But those same words, if they're put in an order, can communicate, have the potential to communicate something that's useful and helpful and a blessing. And the same words, if you put them in a different order, might do just the opposite. Or if you leave something out.
Yeah, I'm happy whenever I can spend some time digging into the etymology of words and looking for connections and what could possibly be a deeper meaning. I tend to focus on what we call the peshat, the simple, it says this, it means this, that's easier for me. But I also know that many people are blessed by looking at a very much deeper understanding. Like, I have read, like you just mentioned, where people associate the word Bamidbar with Davar. I've seen those kind of things as well. But look, what it does when we study these things, it drives us into these texts where we all meet, and it's like we look around and we're like, oh, well, there you are, Michael. You're looking at the same things
Mhm.
I am, and as we look at these things, I think we discover some wonderful truths that benefit us all and bless us all.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, and the communication and coming together and just like, being a light for one another, having that compassion and not to puff ourselves up or to be some kind of a teacher or leader, but just
Yeah,
to learn, wanting to learn, wanting to know. And the possibility that we can come to a place where we don't just believe the same thing, but we see it
yeah. You're
and
you're
we experience it.
I was going
You
to
know,
say one thing that what you just said reminded me. There's a story that I read. I think it was in J.H. Hertz's commentary on the Pentateuch and Haftorahs. He tells a story. I think that's where I read it, where a blind man is walking and he has a torch in his hand. He's walking at night, and someone walks up to him and they said, "Excuse me, what are you doing with the torch? What are you doing? You have a light torch. You're blind. It doesn't matter if you have a torch or not." He said, "Oh, this isn't for me. You know, it's for other people." So sometimes we are able to shed light on something that benefits somebody else. It might not benefit us as much, but I think once we realize that we're in this together. Another story that I read is men are sitting in a boat together, and one pulls out a drill and begins to drill a hole under his seat in the boat. And maybe Todd, as a fisherman, can recognize this as not being so bright. Most of you will get it. And he's drilling the hole, and somebody says, What are you doing? Stop." And he said, No, don't worry. This is, it's only under my seat. You know, so we're in this together, for good or for bad. And I think that that's part of the fun of being in it together, is we can help one another.
Yeah, if the light isn't the one that we make,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But if we're looking to that light that real place that's in the wilderness, you
Yeah.
know, and it's just like it's in nature, you know, it may be an overwhelming picture to be in a natural place, but it causes there's no escape from it. You know, you have to live there and based on what you're given, and just to finish that thing, you know, about the wilderness and being a natural place, you know, and this is what blew my mind, you know, because all of a sudden it just made sense, you know, the difference between being in a place of natural order or being in Babylon, the city,
Confusion.
you know,
Yeah.
where everything is just like, okay, you can have light in the middle of the night, you can make it cold when it's hot, you know,
Whoop. Did we lose you, Michael? Michael, I don't know if perhaps you muted yourself. I tell you what, we'll come back. We'll let you check it out, see what you find, and we'll welcome you back. And there's my friend Karen. How are you? Let me make sure you're unmuted. There you are. How you doing, sister?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. I was just gonna,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
you know, when I think about heading towards the wilderness, a lot of times some of us, we're not necessarily heading to the wilderness. We're running away
Yeah.
from what my sister calls the pagan temple.
Yeah.
And, you know, the priests. And we're just trying to shut everything out, run away, have some peace so we can figure out what's really going on.
I agree. Agree.
You know, you have a relationship with your God, I mean, and you know him, right?
Yeah.
You're close. And then you realize that the core of that is what it is. You know, you no longer have a reason. All times. When I used to be on the worship team and all that, and all of a sudden I have no reason to sing. And all of a sudden I have, you know, no reason to do this.
Yeah.
And then you come to a crossroads and you've got like atheism, one road, and you have agnosticism, which I think is, you know, you acknowledge that there is a higher power, you're just indifferent and you don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the path of faith still, or I should say the search you're seeking, you want to know. And, you know, I'm grateful I chose the right path to still continue to seek, you know, and even at times when we read the prophets, I'm still like, oh, I please be true. Please be true.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really know sometimes. And so I have to take a lot of it still on faith. You know, I hope Moses, you know, knew what he was talking about, you know, that kind of stuff. And still, I still have to have faith to go down that road.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us have been in a long wilderness, and sometimes you feel like, well, you're just going to let go. I'm done. And I'm sure you encounter that with people communicating with you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm done with this. It's not taking me anywhere. I don't know. I can't find this God that I'm looking for.
And it breaks, let me just say, it breaks my heart, honestly. I've said this before. When someone walks away from faith, I reach out and I'm grabbing them and I'm saying, no, don't go. Please don't go yet. Look, I know, but I get it. I do get it. I mean, I understand the desire to run into the desert as fast as you can and get away from it all. I understand wanting things to be true. I remember one time, I'll be quiet, but I have to say, what you said reminded me. I announced that I was going to do a certain study on a certain prophet, and someone commented and said, please don't. And they meant like, oh no, we can't have you go into that and show us that things aren't what we thought. It was like, please just tell me you're not going to tear this apart, which is never my intention, but I get it. It's a difficult journey sometimes.
Yeah, and like Belinda, I toyed with other religions. I call them rebound religions because you're just going to hop from one to another.
Mm-hmm.
We leave a religion and a group, and the desert is a solitary place. You
Yep.
really do go there by yourself. And when you get there, sometimes you find friends. And that's kind of what United Israel is, the friends in the desert.
I like that.
So, yeah.
I'm going to write that down. Friends in the desert.
And, if you're going down that path where you're running away from the pagan temple, don't give up. Don't be indifferent. When you feel like there is a reason that you're here, there really probably is. So always go down that path and try and figure out why you're here. Keep on, I'll never stop seeking. I'm gonna, stop exploring this idea or that idea, and maybe I'll end up agreeing with it, and maybe I won't.
Yeah.
But I think the seeker path really is the right path.
I love it. I agree with you 110%. I don't know what I would do. Like if I didn't have this quest, if I didn't have this desire to understand, like it's inexhaustible. I'm not going to reach a place where I go, well, there you go. It's like I have some friends, acquaintances. They've become friends. They have their YouTube channels. Some of them are young, and they've just announced at the wise age of 35 or whatever that they're an atheist and they've got it all figured out. And it's a little bit disturbing to me, first of all, because I think there's no way you have it all figured out. I promise you. So come on back to the side of the light, come on back and let's look, because it's true. I get, that it's not necessarily easy, but man, I'm with you. I'm not going to give it up. I can tell you now, I'm not going to give it up. I'm in for the long haul.
And who knows where it might lead you?
That's right. That's right. What else you thinking, Karen?
I think that's it for today.
Well, at least it for right now, but hang around because you may have some other wisdom pearls to bring our way. I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
I'm going to before we let our YouTube audience go, just to make a remark, I see that there was a discussion where people are discussing the desert, and this particular comment says desert back then was probably more like the prairies of today. And I would just like to comment a little bit on that because it's important. First of all, there are like 5 words in Hebrew that are translated often either as desert or wilderness. A good example of this is Isaiah 35, verses 1 through 6. In Isaiah 35, verses 1 through 6, it talks about the dry land, Yesesum, Mibar, Betzia, Vetagel, Aravai. It mentions like 5 words for this dry region, the desert. It's beautiful. There's even a Israeli folk song that is sung about how water will break forth in the desert. And maybe if you're good, I'll sing that for you one day, but not today. But anyway, this idea of what is the desert, what is the wilderness, we have a good bit of understanding about not only what those places are, because you can go see them today, but there is a tendency, I think, sometimes to think, well, in the time that the Bible was written, this was something different. We know now from very good science, geological studies, that that's not the case. That this dry desert wasteland, if you will, was dry desert wasteland in the biblical periods as well. So, in fact, in this book, and this isn't the only book, there are quite a few others, but in Har-El's book, he published quite a bit about those geological studies. Like if you go down around the Dead Sea today, I know that some people might say, well, this was a beautiful, lush place until, God destroyed it in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, and people can believe that. But it's been a very wasteland for a very, very long time. Having said that, there are pockets in that area which are taken care of and watered and so forth, and there's some beautiful land there. I mean, a lot of those beautiful, as far as you can see, there's some of the date palm trees and some of the greatest revival of vegetation, fruit and vegetables are grown in the Arava, where all around these greenhouses, if you will, are desert wasteland. But, you put a little water and you take care of it, and you can bring life back to the desert, which is the prophetic vision. So anyway, but thank you guys for joining us on the YouTube audience. If you're on the YouTube right now and you're part of the Yachad, please join the Zoom call so that we can, so you don't miss a thing. We're going to keep going for a while here. So Shabbat Shalom. Many blessings to you on YouTube. Join us next week. God bless. Have a wonderful week.